Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. I realize it has been a while since I posted a video. There's a variety of reasons for that. It's a pandemic, everybody's busy right now, you know. Lots of things have changed in the meantime, including my hair. But we're gonna get right back into it. I was in the middle of a discography run for Iron Maiden. I did a video, part one of this video series, on the first half of Iron Maiden's discography, which was very, very excellent, I must say. And now I'm going to be talking about the second half. Now, I'm going to be doing things a little bit differently because the last video ended up being like over an hour long, I think. And it was just too much. Like, nobody wants to watch an hour-long video of me talking about a band that I'm listening to, right? So I think what I'm going to do is just talk more briefly and give like my overall thoughts on each album instead of breaking it down song by song by song. And hopefully this video will be a lot more concise and easier to watch. And I am going to try to get back into making videos more regularly. I apologize for the long wait. But let's move right on. So we left off in the last video having just listened to the 8th album by Iron Maiden, which is No Prayer for the Dying. And we're going to be starting off today with the album Fear of the Dark, released in 1992. The lineup at this point is still Bruce Dickinson on vocals, still Dave Murray on the guitar. Adrian Smith has been replaced at this point by Janet Gears. And we've got our bass master Steve Harris on bass, obviously, and Nico McBrain on the drums. So overall, just my thoughts. Be Quick or Be Dead, very good classic Iron Maiden opening jam. I really enjoyed Afraid to Shoot Strangers and Fear's the Key, which has a really awesome drum part. Then we get Wasting Love. This is another ballad. I do not enjoy this one as much as Childhood's End. I felt like it was a little more generic, a little more radio rock, not really as inspired. Just my personal tastes. And then we speed up again with The Fugitive. Again, a little bit generic and radio rock friendly, but definitely better than Wasting Love in my opinion. And then we got Weekend Warrior. Weekend Warrior was definitely the weakest song on this album. It reminded me almost like of a song that AC/DC would put out. The solos were cool on it, at the very least. And then Fear of the Dark, that was a very good song, a welcome break from the downhill direction that the album had been going on with The Apparition, and then Judas Be My Guide, and then Weekend Warrior. It was just, the album was kind of like on a downward trend, but picked it back up with a very good ending track. So overall, this album, not one of their best. There were several songs that I thought were too generic, bland, boring, radio friendly. Some bangers here: Childhood's End, Fear of the Dark, Afraid to Shoot Strangers, Fear's the Key. Those were all very good. Overall, I rated this album a 3 out of 5, just middle of the line. Basically enjoyed half the album, and then the other half not so much. Not bad, just kind of boring for Iron Maiden, and almost sounded like they were trying to like do something different, trying to get a little bit more radio friendly on some of these, and just didn't really do it for me. That's not what I want from Iron Maiden. If I wanted a band like that, then I would go actually listen to AC/DC or something like that, you know. Anyway, moving on from that, we have a lineup change. We are replacing Bruce Dickinson with Blaze Bayley for the next two albums. So we have Blaze Bayley on vocals for this next album, which is The X Factor, and the following album, Virtual XI or Virtual 11. So The X Factor is released in 1995, and it almost seems like the end of the last album, where I was mentioning that it was becoming a little more not so Iron Maiden style, kind of continues straight into this album and leads into this, I guess, like different style that the vocalist Blaze Bayley has compared to Bruce Dickinson. He's not a bad vocalist. I've seen other people review Iron Maiden's albums talk about how they think that he's bad and like they really don't like his vocals. I didn't have the same experience. I did like his vocals. I actually enjoyed his singing style, but I didn't think it fit in with this band. Obviously there's no comparison to Bruce Dickinson, and overall it was a downgrade from what we had before with Bruce. So about the album specifically, it didn't feel very metal, honestly. It almost felt like a rock album. Like I said, the trend of the musical style seems to be going in that direction on last album, this album. I'm not super into it. But that said, there are some good moments on this album that I did enjoy. I really liked Sign of the Cross. That was an excellent song, and I've seen that performed live by Bruce, and wow, it's a really, really good song when Bruce is doing it. But even on this album with Blaze, I still felt like it was probably my favorite track off this album. I also really liked The Edge of Darkness. Very good song. Other than that, mostly slow, average rock riffs, nothing super inspired. It felt like they were not really trying to blaze their own trail. Excuse me for the pun there. And I'm really just not enjoying the change of pace as much. So this album, I gave it a rating of 2.5 out of 5. Exactly just average album. Nothing exceptional, but at the same time nothing bad, just not what I wanted, disappointing for it being an Iron Maiden album. So this leads into the next album, Virtual XI, that comes out in 1998. We have the same lineup with Blaze Bayley on vocals, and we have a little bit better. We have some interesting tracks. Future Real starts out this album as the opening track, and I actually really dug it. It was a very cool jam. And then we head into The Angel and the Gambler, which was like just not very good. We're back to the mediocre radio rock, and it's ridiculously long, which makes it even worse for me. It's I'll talk about this more as we get further into the discography and Iron Maiden heads into this proggier and proggier direction with the length of their songs and albums. But I personally, just my personal opinion, I'm not into prog. I'm not into like super long songs. The longer a song goes on, the more I'm like, okay, if this is not really like changing the song and super innovative and everything, then you really just need to cut this song by a few minutes. Like, there's no reason for it to keep going on. And we get a lot of that, starting now especially. And this continues through their discography, even when Bruce comes back. But anyways, Lightning Strikes Twice is another good song on this album. I would say it's maybe like my second favorite song on this album after The Klansman, which follows it. The Klansman is a banger. I've also heard that song being sung by Bruce live, not in person, but like in videos, and I was very impressed. It's an awesome song. When Two Worlds Collide, not very great, especially following The Klansman right after it. It's just very noticeably not as strong of a song. Same thing with The Educated Fool, just didn't really stand out for me. Don't Look to the Eyes of a Stranger was better, more dynamic and more memorable, but still just like way too long. So the best songs on this album, I would say, are The Klansman, Lightning Strikes Twice, and Future Real. And I gave it the same rating as the last album, 2.5 out of 5. I did say that it was better, but not that much better. It's a middle of the road okay album, you know, not bad, not very good. It just doesn't really blend in with what we've gotten so far in this excellent discography. It's a very noticeable downgrade, it's a very noticeable change, and unfortunately the start of a direction that continues with the progginess, the length, and all of that. So, following that, we finally get not only Bruce Dickinson, but also Adrian Smith back in the band. Janik stays in the band, so at this point they now have 3 guitarists, which is a little excessive, but it works out for them very well. They are all excellent guitarists in their own right, and they each add their own flavor and style. Janik being a little bit closer, I think, to the style of Dave Murray, and we get Brave New World in 2000. And this album is noticeably better than the last several albums. It almost feels like a return to classic, what I call classic Maiden. It's an excellent album, and definitely my favorite at this point from the latter half of their discography. It is long. That's just the way things are going to be from now on, unfortunately. Long songs, but it just felt so much like a return to form stylistically that I was overjoyed, and I was able to overlook the length of some of the songs. The best songs on this album, in my opinion, are The Nomad, Ghost of the Navigator, The Fallen Angel, and Brave New World. So 4 songs that really stood out to me as excellent songs on this album. And I give it a rating of 4 out of 5, considerably better than the last several albums. Welcome return to excellence. Trim the song lengths a little bit and we're golden. So we continue from there to the album Dance of Death in 2003. The album cover. I feel like I have to point this out because how could I not? The album cover of Dance of Death is absolutely terrible. I don't know how it was released as is. I think the band have even commented on how it's unfinished and it was not supposed to look like that. So why it was released looking like that, I don't know. But let's move on from there because that has nothing to do with the music. That has nothing to do with the band's talent or anything. So songs on this album that really stuck out to me as memorable and excellent songs were The Rainmaker, or just Rainmaker, sorry, No More Lies, and Passchendaele. The others were not quite as memorable. In fact, I ended up writing my write-up on this album a little bit after I had finished listening to it. Usually I try to do it as soon as I'm done listening. And by the time I sat down and went to write about this album, I was like, I don't even really remember the rest of the songs apart from those 3. I remember liking them, so you know there were no bad songs on this album, but not really memorable. Dance of Death was also a pretty cool song. I do remember that one, and I have to give special kudos to Adrian Smith for what he did for Passchendaele. That was a truly epic song. From my understanding, he wrote the song, and it's I'm not gonna talk too much about the history of the song because I'm not very familiar with it. I know it's about a specific battle, the Battle of Passchendaele, and it is a truly epic song. Definitely the recommended song for this album. I'm so sorry if you can hear my cat meowing. He's right outside the door and he probably wants me to let him inside, so just try to ignore that. So I rated this album a 3.5 out of 5. It's a little bit of a dip after Brave New World. I thought Brave New World was so excellent, and so this song to follow right after it, it's hard to compare. But still definitely better than the two Blaze Bayley albums that we just listened to. And more than worthy of a few listens. So, following that, we have A Matter of Life and Death, released in 2006. Way better album cover. I must say, for this album, I prefer the first half of the album compared to the second half, especially the songs These Colors Don't Run and Brighter Than a Thousand Suns, and also The Longest Day. Overall, the album features more lengthy songs, but that's not so unusual for them anymore. I mean, this is obviously the direction they've decided to go in. So I rated this album a 3 out of 5, respectably good, albeit not that different from the last few. I'm starting to, at this point, feel like there's only so much I can say about these albums because they've obviously found their groove, found their style, and now it's really just not a lot of differentiation, not a lot of variety in what we're getting. Let's move on to the next album, because we finally have another album that I feel like is just as strong as Brave New World and almost even just as strong as their earlier albums. So in 2010, we get The Final Frontier. And yeah, right off the bat, it's the same exact Maiden formula, 4 to 10 minute songs in the new Maiden style, but I really, really liked this album. Very similar feels as Brave New World. And I'm getting touches of that classic pre-Seventh Son Maiden. And I get standout tracks, one after another. El Dorado, fantastic. The Alchemist, a banger. Isle of Avalon and Starblind are back-to-back epics that got me incredibly invested in the musical journey on this album. And then we get The Man Who Would Be King and the final epic track, The Wild Wind Blows. Blew my socks off. They are masterpieces. There were so many standout tracks on this album that I just had to consider it better than the other albums that I've been listening to recently that I felt were more lackluster. So by far, best album in the second half of the discography beside Brave New World, and I gave it a 4 out of 5 rating and wrote, give me more of this, please. Please, Iron Maiden, I know you can do it. I mean, this was released in 2010, so obviously they've still got it in them to give me albums like this one. And the best tracks of this album, I think I mentioned them: El Dorado, The Alchemist, Starblind, Isle of Avalon, Man Who Would Be King, Wild Wind Blows. I mean, like basically half the album were the best songs. So this takes us at last to the most recent album in their discography, The Book of Souls, released in 2015. This album, when I talk about how they're getting longer and longer, I didn't realize how bad it was until I got to this album. It's like, I don't know how long it was, like an hour and a half, something crazy like that. It's like, what? Seriously? Like, I know that that's not so unusual in music. There's plenty of, especially in recent years, like bands putting out like hour and a half, 2 hour, whatever, however long albums, like double albums. And it's like, okay, I get you're writing a lot of material and you want to get it all out now. But you could, if you wanted to, split it up into 2 albums. That wouldn't be so bad, you know. Why do we have to get it all at the same time? But anyways, so the end of my journey, my Iron Maiden listening journey, happens here in the Book of Souls, this monster of an album. It almost makes me nervous about the future of Iron Maiden and whether they're just gonna keep getting longer and longer. Hopefully not. Fingers crossed. But let's get to the music, right? So we've got standout tracks on this album: The Red and the Black, The Book of Souls, and the 18-minute long epic Empire of the Clouds. Yes, it is the longest song on the album. Yes, I think it is ridiculously long and they really should have cut it down. But I will say it was one of my favorite songs off this album. It didn't feel too much like they were just canoodling and like adding in extra choruses and making it long for the sake of being long. I felt like there was actual progression, there was actual building and depth. The one thing I will mention, I gotta hand it to Bruce Dickinson. I know he was struggling with cancer during some of this. I don't know if it was during the making of the album or the recording of the album, I'm not sure. But it's really a testament to just how strong this man is as a vocalist, that he was able to put out this epic long album at the quality that he puts out while he was battling cancer. I can't even imagine how difficult that was and how much talent you have to have in order to get through something like that. But I just had to mention that. That takes some serious talent, okay? And he really knocked it out of the park too, his vocals on this album. Like, I couldn't even notice, I didn't even notice a difference, if there was a difference. Like I said, I'm not sure whether he was struggling with that at all while he was recording the vocals. But if this is a sign of things to come, this album, and what they've been putting out recently, then I will hesitatingly accept it. But I really hope somewhere deep, deep down inside that they start returning more to their former Iron Maiden, classic Maiden style that they put out in the first 6-ish albums of their discography. But at the same time, there are plenty of songs that I'm still enjoying on these albums. Some of them even more than some of the songs in the first half of their discography. Overall, this was an incredible experience and a great crash course in the history of metal and the influence that this band have had on other metal bands, which is very obvious. Having listened to all of this music, I'm like, that sounds familiar. That sounds familiar. Yeah, they definitely had a huge influence on metal bands, and metal music in general. So, the best songs off of this album, I thought, were The Red and the Black, Book of Souls, and The Empire of the Clouds. And my rating was 3.5 out of 5. Just make it a little bit shorter next time, and I might bump that score up. But yeah, a very commendable effort and truly a special album. Still true metal legends after all of these years. And that's about all I have for this. Like I said, hopefully a shorter video. Yeah, definitely way shorter. But I have been going on long enough. I'm sure you are sick of me. So, the next band of the month. I've been thinking about it a lot, and I'm thinking I could either do this 2 different ways. So, listening to a 16 album discography, especially one that had songs as long as Iron Maiden's are, was very difficult. I thought originally it was only going to take me 1 month, and it took me, what, like 3 months? That's because I've been very busy, like I mentioned, but even then, I feel like after a certain point, you do get burnt out. I was starting to feel like, oh god, I have to listen to another album right now, and so I'm thinking maybe what I should do to kind of keep things fresh for me and make things easier on myself would be to maybe like switch up doing long discographies like this one where it's like 16 albums with bands that have smaller, shorter discographies. So I'm thinking I might do that just to make things easier on myself. But as for the next band of the month, so I've given it a lot of thought, and I think for my next band of the month, I'm going to choose a band with a very short discography just to mix things up. And I've decided to go with Dark Angel, thrash metal legends. I have listened to Darkness Descends. That's the only Dark Angel album that I have listened to, and I'm really, really looking forward to listening to the rest of their discography because that is one of my all-time favorite thrash metal albums. So, I believe they have like 5 studio albums, so that should be a pretty short one. Hopefully I can get that video out pretty soon. But if you want to listen to Dark Angel along with me, listen to their discography, and then in the comments of my Dark Angel video, give me your thoughts on their discography, and we can discuss that if you want to. For now, that's going to be it for me. Thank you so much for watching this video. Talk to me about your thoughts about Iron Maiden's discography, what you think of it, especially the second half. And I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye-bye.